If you have a little trouble getting your pulley off your shaft, or you're loosening off there the key, you can always put a little oil in there if you like, but just by tapping the end and putting pressure in behind the pulley, it does come off. And as you can see, I'm not really tapping it that hard because the location of it's a little hard. Yeah, it's starting to move now. There we go. Actually, one good whack would have probably done it, but it was just an awkward spot to get at, and we're trying to film this at the same time. Sounds like a train coming now. So we're ready to lift off the motor, get into the shop, and start working on it. Take a pair of vice grips. You can clip the end of the key, and just once you got it tightened, you can pry against towards the shaft, and that gets your key out a quick way. The engine's not mounted as anything, so it's just sitting on a little piece of plywood, and there you are, and the key's out. Here's the starter block. That button, white button there, is your push button. The plug-in for electric is just below it, and it saves on cold winter days when you're trying to start or pull starting, and it electric start is definitely a benefit. In all cases with small engines, there's a lot of shrouding in some of them, and yet it has to be part of the process of getting your engine totally taken apart. But you got to remember that we are actually going to be doing a rebuild here, and we are removing the gas tank. We'll be removing a lot of stuff, and we're going to put new rings into this baby, and she'll be like a brand new engine. Want to make sure you got no gas in the tank, or at least shut off the line, so there is a little bit in there. You know, it's not dripping all over the place. There's a clamp there that you have to take off. You want to clean your ends, your shafts. Anytime that you're lifting something out through, there's a bearing, there's a seal in that sub pump, so you don't want to wreck it. And not only that, it'll make it a lot easier for assembling that pulley back on again. And that's just the fuel tank bracket that we're taking off next. All the head bolts were loosened up just prior to this. We're just showing you the sequence basically. They all have to come off to get that outer shroud off. There's a couple Usually there's a couple of bolts underneath your housing. I'm going to drain the oil out of her. This oil is from last winter running, and you can see how black it is. This engine itself was just smoking like crazy when it started up last winter. So we knew very well the oil rings were gone on it, or the rings were finished. I'm going to try to keep your bolts organized, because there is the odd one that's longer than the other and it has to go back in the same spot. So you want to make sure that you got the bolts back in the same holes. Upon examination, we can see that the flywheel and where the magnets are, they're a little rusty. You should take some emery cloth or a very fine wet sandpaper, and sand down the magnets and the armature eventually too. Here we're just checking the gears out. They look pretty good. We're just kind of showing you. We had it going there pretty good, but got a little stuck. But how it pops into the flywheel, and you want to examine the gears anyway. That's how it turns. Now we're ready to take the head off. And as you can see, there's a bit of oil. There's a little bit of water in there too, actually, from the gas. And the exhaust valve is carboned. The head gasket itself is not that bad in shape, so there's no leakage outside the gasket. So that's a good indication the head's not warped. Taking off the oil sub cover. Just lightly tap it, it'll come off. Yeah, you're getting it. See, it's just ready to get it up evenly. Like you should have had two hands on there. There he goes. And it will come out fairly easy. Inside there is your flywheel. That gear there is a butterfly, which operates your governor. And there's your crank and your guts of the engine. As that spins around, that opens up and pushes against the lever there. That's inside the crankcase, which happens to be hooked to your governor. That's the whole governor. And that regulates the speed, keeps it constant. Those open up as that spins and puts pressure against that paddle. Which in turn controls your throttle because the linkage is hooked to it. There's your main bearing and your bolts, the two bolts. You have a locking washer type system on it where you have to bend them open, and that's your dip. This is only a dipstick type of oil slinger. It just splashes into the oil and splashes the oil all around inside. There's your cam gear, there's a large gear, and then the small gear is on your crank is crank gear. There's the two bolts there, and we'll get the piston right out of the top. We're just going to loosen them up and get the piston right out of the top. We're not going to try and remove anything else, not necessary. Here we're just demonstrating turning around and how the dipstick and stuff works on the oil splasher, and it's a little tough to see, but right there, that's where the timing marks are. There's a real fine line and a little dot on the cam gear. Those two have to be exactly across from each other. There's the dot there you can see on the large gear, and there's a real fine line on the tooth of the crankshaft gear. Now we're taking a screwdriver and we're just going to get it on the edge where it's bent over and remove the lock. There's one on both sides. It's just a piece of metal that goes right around like a washer on both, right around the cam or the bearing, and folds over the bolt so that the bolts don't turn. You want to make sure they're torqued properly. That helps prevent them from, if they do come loose, that they stay there at least. So it's just a matter of loosening the one bolt, and then if we can't get at the other one, you just turn the crank a little bit to position the other bolt down a little bit lower, and to get at it, to open it up. It just pops off like that. Get the screwdriver in there, tap it, it'll just pop right off, and then you can turn your crank and push your piston right up over out of the top of the block itself. You might not reach all the way, you might have to get a screwdriver or something underneath there again and pry it just a little bit further to get it up, get the rings up and out of the cylinder at the top here. There she is, she's popped. Want to replace the old, or check the ring gap of any engine, you just put the compression ring in. You leave the other rings on the piston and you just push down into it. It squares it up very nicely so you can get your ring end gap there measured. That's the new ring, so it's, you can see it's very, very tight. It's going to be good. Put a feeler gauge in it, measure. That's how you check your ring end gap. Check your manual for the clearance allowance. It's a way of telling if you need a ring job or not. You put your first new ring on. It's the oil ring. Goes down to the bottom. The second ring is a scraper ring. It's got a little edge on it, and it faces downward so that it scrapes the oil down the cylinder. You don't want it upside down. You don't want it going up, because you want to get the oil scraped off the cylinder walls back down into the crankcase. And then finally your compression ring. You want to keep the ring end gaps separated about a third over the piston, That's what I'm trying to demonstrate here. And you want to avoid the hole where the small end bearing is. The piston pin goes through. You don't want the ring end gaps to end up there at all, so you go about 1/3 with the oil ring. You start, position the ring end gap, and then the second ring you want to move it right over to about 1/3, just to kind of divide them up really pretty well. Use the full space. If you don't have one of these, a large clamp, hose clamp will work. It's a little more difficult, but it will work. And you just tap her down the piston. You want to try and get the piston as straight as possible going down to position the large end of the bearing right there. Sometimes they might be a little twisted or a little off, and it makes it a little difficult to get it back onto the large end of the crankcase or crank shaft. So we're having just a little bit of a problem there. You can get a pair of pliers in there, needle those pliers, and twist it around a little bit. If you can't, pop the piston back out, turn her a little bit, and pop her back in again. That's what we did here. We just popped her back out a little bit, turned her, and we're putting her back down again. And she's fitting on there. Now we're putting the other half on of the large end bearing on the connecting rod. And we're tapping down the lock washer over the nut so that they don't turn. Be sure to torque it properly. It's amazing how good a shape this gasket is on here still. It's just like brand new. This is an old engine. So we're just layering a little bit of grease, thin layer of grease over it before we install it again. Now that gear there, your butterfly gear, you wanted to try and mesh it up to the big gear there, the cam. So when you're putting it on, sometimes it just doesn't want to go in quite right. All you have to do is turn the crank a little bit, and they'll mesh together properly, and that will just pop right down in there. There should be no effort. And there's locating pins to stagger your bolts tightening sequence. You always do that. We clean the heads, the valves, and all we use is wire brush. Actually, it's our little secret. It's a quick way of doing it. We just use a grinder with one of those soft wire brushes, and it really does a good quick job, and it cleans it right up. So we're always satisfied with that. So put your bolts back in, keep them in the same place where they were before. Like I say, some are a little bit longer. You'll get used to that, but anyway, it's just a good policy. Next we're going to examine the recoil clutch, as they call it, starter clutch. So we're taking the small bolts out of there. You don't want to tighten those up too tight, they're just very small bolts, but you want to snug them. Take a screwdriver and just catch an edge somewhere, and it'll pop off. There you go. Once that ball bearing falls down like that in that slot, it can't turn the other way. It's good and clean. It looks alright. That's loose enough there that it's not tightening up in any way. We did put a little grease in there, by the way. Just not much. Just, you know, you wipe your finger on the end of the excess grease or something and you put a little bit on. You don't have to put very much at all. You can make yourself a tool if you want. These come off fairly easy. I haven't run into too much of a problem. You can tap them with a screwdriver and loosen them off that way. Or if you get yourself a piece of pipe and then just a grinder, cutting wheel, cut out 4 corners on it for the ears, and then you know, say a 2.5 inch, 3 inch length pipe, cut 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch grooves in it, and then put a hole in the through the width of it so that you can get a screwdriver through it, or a large screwdriver, and you got yourself a tool. You have to put pressure underneath in order to get that flywheel off. Good indication of why we have to, because we know there's points under there, because the coil does not have a ground to it, so the wires are heading underneath the flywheel. You can smack it with a hammer and pressure underneath, but we don't recommend hitting it too hard right on the end of that shaft, because you will have to end up using a file and rounding it back up. Best way is to get a punch that you can fit inside the center of that hole and do it that way. Now here's the cover to the points. You can see the lump there where the condenser is hiding underneath. So we're going to remove that next. You can just see the wires coming in off the top of that underneath there, and there's by the manufacturer they put some kind of a glue or whatever just on the top that helps seal it where the wires go down inside, so that helps keep moisture out. And as you can see, I was surprised that this is in excellent condition. There's no oil whatsoever. If there is, it could be a bearing problem and your block is no more good. The other little problem is that little cam that opens and closes the points. You put your 20 thousandths in there, keep it nice and clean, your gauge, your feeler gauge when you're putting it in. That's basically how you check it, as a 20 thousandths, and that the points were set right on. You didn't have to do anything to it. Cover's back on now, and we're replacing the flywheel. You want to keep the magnet down below or away from any other metal. It makes it just a lot easier. You know, you're not fighting with the magnet if you keep it down away. So it's good policy. It's kind of something to remember. The washer usually is concave, then you want to put the concave upwards so that you're putting pressure down onto the washer. It's just kind of a system they have that helps it a little tighter. So I didn't have a gauge, and I just used, and you might hear this on the video, now here's a trick I don't tell anybody about, but if you have a lid off of a butter dish, like margarine, you just cut a piece off the lid, and slide it underneath there. And that's about 10/1000ths of an inch. On Briggs engines, it works well. And you just tighten your bolts back up. Slide her back out and you're done. This is a dry run, and we're brand new rings, and surprisingly got up to about 85, 86 psi, and there's a spark. You get a good strong spark. Now we're going to clean the carburetor. We pulled out the main jet, and there was, you know, from the water and stuff, the old gas, it was in bad shape. So we're gonna, I just got some carb cleaner. You get it in an aerosol can. You use it on cars, you know, for throttle gum and that, for sticking throttles. It's really good. Rule of thumb, if the inlet needle has a neoprene end, the seat itself with metal, you can just look right in. But if it's a metal inlet needle, then the seat is neoprene. You can put your thumb, or I mean your finger, on the end of that, and get the other orifices. There's a couple of other little holes that are on the side of that thing. That's the solid bowl there. And the choke plate, you want to make sure the choke closes properly, closes tight, it's not bent, functions okay. Same thing with the throttle. Can't be too loose or anything like that, or it lets too much air into the carb body and stuff, you have problems. So I'm just going over things again, but there is a channel where that long insert was going up through, or the high speed circuit goes right up in through there. That's why you have to take it off before you open up the body, or otherwise you'll wreck it or bend it. So we're just getting it positioned. We get the float is level. It's one of those tang type. It's a copper one, so it has a tang for leveling it, but we didn't need to. It's still pretty good for level wise. So we're just putting it back together and assemble it back onto the engine. So you hook your linkage back up. There's always going to be linkages to hook back to any carburetor. You hook them on first, and then you mount it to your intake manifold. So here we are, we just put it all back, carburetor back on. First crank, there we go. He's just playing with the choke there a little bit. The engine's rattling around like crazy, trying to hold it.